if you want to lose weight, most people would agree that first, you might want to cut down on the late night ice cream binging before you spend too much time trying to dial in just the perfect workout plan. If you want to grow rich, most people would agree that you might want to first pay down some credit card debt before you spend a whole lot of time and energy trying to understand modern portfolio theory. But if you want to be a great leader, the advice you might get from most people is maybe not quite as great as it could be. You might hear something like, go back to school, get your MBA, and then read every best-selling leadership book from now until the end of time. Well, just like losing weight, just like trying to grow rich, just like just about any other significant pursuit in life, trying to become a better leader is something that might be best done instead of by trying to figure out how we can do it most brilliantly, by instead learning to stop doing the stupid things that we're already doing that are holding us back. Today, I'm going to talk a fair amount about bosses. Okay? Bosses don't always have the best reputation in the world, but in my 15 years of working with leaders and leadership teams, I've ascertained what I think might be a previously undiscovered truth about leaders. Here's what I've learned. Almost no leader wakes up in the morning just hoping to be a lousy boss. Okay? Now, they do make mistakes. They do miss opportunities. But today, I'm going to take the privilege to talk about those mistakes and missed opportunities in a lighthearted way as the stupid things that leaders do. Okay? I'm going to talk about the stupid things that hold them back, that undermine their teams, and that undermine their business performance. I grew up with a CEO father who was obsessed with company culture. He and his leadership team were on a mission to create one of the most amazing workplace environments that you've ever seen. And I would argue that they did that. They created one of the best workplaces in America, voted 5 times in a row as the #1 best place to work in Omaha, Nebraska. I remember vividly as a child growing up listening to stories that he would tell over the dinner table. Stories like this one, the day that he came home just beaming about having laid dollar bills all over the boardroom table. 10s, 20s, 50s, hundreds. Okay? And bringing in a team of young employees that were so deserving of a bonus and recognition, and asking them to pick up a few dollar bills as he explained how fantastic they were and how much he appreciated the work that they did for the nonprofit organization that he ran. Not only did he send those employees home with a well-deserved bonus, but also hopefully a memory that will last a lifetime. And I'm told he reported the income and paid the payroll taxes too. Okay? Another story I remember, having dinner on the weekend, he was explaining to me proudly that one of his vice presidents had spent the morning excitedly at a used car lot with a single mother employee, trying to make sure that she could buy a reasonable car at a fair price. And then explaining that the company was going to work to extend a low-interest loan to help with the payments. Lastly, I remember a story. I remember him showing me handwritten notes and listening to tear-filled voicemails from the grandparents of his employees. You see, he had spent the previous week writing handwritten letters to some of his rising stars' grandparents just to let them know how exceptional the CEO of their company thought that they were, and to make sure those grandparents knew how proud they should be of their grandsons and granddaughters. Now, growing up, I kind of thought that's what leaders do. I thought that's the kind of stuff CEOs did all the time, until I had my first experience in the real world and realized that's not exactly what happens in every workplace. Okay? Now, when you grow up thinking leadership is one thing and then seeing instances that are very different, you can't help but notice that gap. You can't help but notice the stupid things that leaders do or don't do that undermines their cultural health and their business success. So, for the last decade or so, I've been kind of making a list of these stupid things. Okay? And today I'm going to share 3 of them that I think are some of the more common ones that I see, but also ones that are easiest to overcome if we want to. The first is not having a clear vision for what leadership is, what it means. 12 years ago, for the first time ever, I had a chance to sit down with the executives of a Fortune 500 company. I haven't had many opportunities like this since. But I had a chance to talk to them about their leadership goals, their culture initiatives that they were pushing across their organization. And I can still remember, I asked a question. I said, what does it mean to be a leader in your company? And they didn't have an answer. I mean, they ended up saying words. They, after they kind of looked at each other, scratched their heads for a minute, they ended up saying things. But what they said didn't come together in a coherent vision to answer that question of what does it mean to be a great leader in your organization. Leaders should have an answer to that question. They should have a cohesive vision for what they expect from leaders, and it should be consistent from department to department across an organization. A better answer than what they gave me might sound something like this. What it means to be a leader in our company is to have a relentless focus on the mission, on the culture, and on a pursuit of excellence. It might sound like, my job as a leader is to help employees always feel proud of the work that they do in the organization that they represent. My job is to make sure employees feel seen and valued and appreciated for the work that they do. That it's my job to always, always, always be building star employees, helping people be successful, not just at work, but even in life. That a leader's job is to protect the right of good employees to work with good employees, to deal with the dud performers that are pulling down the organization or pulling down others, to make decisions in a collaborative way, to communicate so people understand and maybe even have a say in the decisions that are going to impact them. To understand that conflict isn't necessarily good or bad, but it's going to come no matter what, and so we deal with it effectively. And lastly, to try to help both yourself and everybody else have fun while we're doing the work that we do every single day. That would be a coherent vision for what it might mean to be a leader. The second stupid thing that I see leaders do is lousy listening. Lousy listening. I want to introduce a concept that is fairly well-founded out of social psychology. It's called the power paradox. The power paradox essentially says that as the same person gains status, gains power, maybe they become a manager, maybe they become a director, maybe they become an executive, that at every step along that path, statistically speaking, there are lots of exceptions, but statistically speaking, that same person is likely to see a degradation of their social intelligence skills. They're likely to become things like less empathetic. They're likely to interrupt more often. They're likely to talk more and talk more about themselves. They're likely to be less open to information that disconfirms something they already think. They're likely to talk louder. They're likely to use profanity more often. They're likely to make jokes, maybe use stinging and biting humor at other people's expense. These types of things are statistically linked on the same person to the acquisition of power. Now that's a big mistake that a leader can make. Okay? We want to avoid that. A great way to summarize the power paradox is that the very traits that might make someone worthy of leadership in the first place are the same traits that degrade as we might acquire that power. I want to specifically tackle listening. Okay? Listening is one of those soft skills, one of those skills that degrade with power. And almost everyone would agree listening is a skill that you'd like to have in a leader. Okay? So I want to just talk for a second about my 2 favorite pieces of advice that I've ever gotten on how to improve your listening. So if you want to avoid this stupid thing, think about how you respond to questions. When someone comes to you and asks a question, here's what I'd like you to suggest. Don't answer it. Okay? Try one of 2 things instead. Instead, say, why do you ask? Respond by asking the other person what's behind their question. See, I had a manager not too long ago tell me a hilarious story related to this point. He said, oh yeah, I've learned this one the hard way. He went on to tell me that he had been working with a really young and naive new employee. And that new employee, within a couple weeks or a couple months of taking the job, came up to the manager and sort of nervously said, hey, can you remind me, what is our policy for requesting time off? And the manager said, oh, something like, well, we need 72 hours notice, and we'd like you to fill out this form over here. And the employee kind of hesitated and said, okay, and went back to his desk. 2 minutes later, that employee's colleague came rushing up to the manager and said, what the heck did you say? The manager said, what do you mean? She said, his wife just called. She's at the hospital in labor, and, and you've got him over there filling out paperwork? Okay. He said, yeah, I learned. I should have said, well, here's the policy, but why are you asking? Right? Maybe he would have given a different answer. My other favorite question that I love to ask, when I'm trying to get better at listening, as I am trying to get better at listening, is I like to ask someone when they ask me a question what they think. Instead of answering the question, say, well, what do you think? There are 3 amazing benefits to learning to do this that will benefit everyone. Number 1 is other people will learn that you care what they think. That's a benefit. Number 2, they might have a better idea than you. And if that's the case, you avoid looking like a nincompoop, and you end up with a better idea. Number 3, they may have a terrible idea. What they say may make no sense whatsoever. It might get you sued. Okay? If that's the case, is that not still helpful to be aware that there's a knowledge gap there? Now you know where you can focus on coaching or educating, etc. Learn to listen more by asking a couple of these simple questions. The last stupid thing that I see leaders do that I want to focus on today is the mistake of thinking that work and play are necessarily opposites. If I would have asked you all, what's the opposite of work? Many of you would have said play. But we can have fun in the workplace. I have a friend that recently moved jobs. She's been at her new employer when she told me the story, about 3 weeks. And she was describing, she went from a pretty tough workplace, not a great organization. She didn't love her job, and she's so happy in her new position with a first-rate organization. And she was describing, she said, you know, it took me until my 3rd week to really dial in what I think is the difference. Couldn't put my finger on it until just now. And she said, it's laughter. In my old organization, I just didn't hear laughter. And in my new organization, I hear it all the time. Laughter's like the canary in the coal mine, right? It's a great sign of whether or not you have a healthy organization. She went on to share that at her old job, they had sort of been conditioned that when, if employees were visiting, catching up over their weekend plans, and a suit, that was her terms, sort of walked onto the floor, they were conditioned to scatter back to their desks and pretend that they were working and kind of hold their breath, hoping that the executive just marched on by without stopping. That was her old job. She went on to tell me in her new job, just that week, she had had a conversation with colleagues. They were having some fun planning an upcoming event. There was some laughter, etc. And the CEO walked onto the floor. She jumped up and went back to her desk. The rest of her employees kind of hung out, kept visiting. The CEO wandered up and said, what are you guys up to? Ended up introducing herself to the new employee, inviting her over, and they had a 5-minute conversation before the CEO wandered off. Now, I want to make sure you heard this. This was during work hours. Okay? Can you imagine, right? Yes, we can imagine. We can have a good time while we work hard. This is not the 1800s. Okay? There's no reason in today's modern world that we can't work as hard as we've ever worked and encourage our people to have a blast while they're doing it. To do otherwise is a real stupid thing that leaders do. So if you like this idea, okay, if you've been inspired at all by this idea of avoiding these stupid things, I'd like to encourage you to ask yourself this question more often. And the question is, what would a really lousy boss do in this situation? How would a really bad boss, how would a really bad leader start this meeting? How would a really bad leader say thank you? How would a really bad leader fill in the blank? Okay? Because the goal is, if we can get a clearer picture of what stupid leadership looks like, about what these mistakes, whether they're unintentional, as they mostly are, then we can learn to do the opposite. We can learn to get better by subtraction. That's my challenge for you all, if you choose to accept it, is to focus a bit more on what stupid leaders might do and do the opposite. Because, as one final hat tip to something that I learned from my father, if you want to get better at anything in life, it's a whole lot easier to stop doing stupid things than it is to start being brilliant. Thank you.